Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Basilica, Heritage Conservation and Appreciation. We are your hosts for today.
Hi, I'm Angel Stinson.
Hi, I am Moko Arukan, and we are very excited to see you all today.
Before we start, here are a few guidelines and reminders. We would like to request everyone to please use your full name on your screens for easy identification. We also remind everyone that this webinar will be recorded for documentation and educational purposes. Feel free to send comments, questions, and feedback in the chat box as long as you're being respectful. And lastly, please stay on mute for now to avoid background noises.
Today, we are bringing together practitioners to discuss cultural heritage and its preservation and appreciation. This is in reference to the 400th year anniversary of the San Sebastian Basilica, a historic all steel metal church in Quiapo, Manila, and the only all steel building in Asia.
We aim to encourage Filipinos to support the San Sebastian Basilica Conservation and Development Foundation's campaign in continuing preservation, as well as to discuss the place of heritage in our current times. Let us begin with an opening prayer and the Philippine national anthem.
Let me be the change I want to see. To do with strength and wisdom all that needs to be done, and become the hope that I can be. Set me free from my fears and hesitations. Grant me courage and humility. Give me the spirit to face the challenge and start the change I long to see. Today I start the change I want to see. Even if I'm not the light, I can be the spark in faith, service and communion. Let us start the change we want to see, the change that begins in me. Today I start the change I want to see. Even if I'm not the light, I can be the spark in faith, service and communion. Let us start the change we want to see, the change that begins in me. Live Jesus in our hearts forever.
Mayang magiliw, kaya sa silangan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiging, sa manlulupig, di ka masisi. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simayan, sa langit mamakaw, Manilagang tulad, awit sa panlayang minamahal. Ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagdidinig. Ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng buwan, ating pagsinta mo ay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya ng pag may mga
ask Associate Dean Magdalena De Leon for a few opening remarks.
Hi, yeah, good afternoon. So, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Beyond the Basilica. I hope you are all in safe spaces and staying healthy. The pandemic has indeed caught everyone off guard, but I hope this doesn't become an excuse to disregard what will always be deemed essential to our lives, such as our culture and the arts. The Benilde Arts and Culture Cluster is one with Benilde Arts Management, the National Commission for Culture and the Arts, and the San Sebastian Basilica Foundation Incorporated in encouraging individuals, institutions, and groups to support the campaign in preserving the country's cultural heritage and being trailblazers in the arts and culture sector to ensure its protection, promotion, and proliferation. I would also like to express our warmest gratitude to all the partners who have made this event possible. I hope you could continually support us in our future programs as we aspire to be a leader in creative education by instigating progressive, inclusive, and ethical artistic processes. Thank you very much, and I hope we could save San Sebastian together.
Thank you so much. We are happy you all took the time to be here despite your busy schedules. Welcome to Beyond the Basilica Heritage Conservation and Appreciation. We are here to discuss cultural heritage, its preservation and appreciation. We have our three speakers to talk about the place of cultural heritage in education, architecture, and the online world.
Hopefully, you'll feel inspired to support the San Sebastian Foundation's campaign in continuing the preservation of the San Sebastian Basilica. And I also hope you participate in other heritage activities all around the Philippines. Cultural heritage can be both tangible and intangible, but its loss is invaluable to us as Filipinos. To begin our webinar, let me now introduce our first speaker, Sir Brenton Andres. Brenton Y. Andres' passion in life is teaching. He was a social studies teacher at the University of the Philippines Integrated School for 9 years. He served as head of the Social Studies Department and head of the Social Sciences and Humanities Cluster. He earned his BSE with a double major in Social Studies and Communication Arts in English, magna cum laude, and his Master of Arts in Asian Studies from the University of the Philippines, Diliman. He was a top-notcher in the April 2011 licensure examination for teachers and was a recipient of the 2018 Gawad Colegio Maxima Horda Velasquez Excellence in Teaching Award from the UP College of Education. Currently, he is a research student at the Tokyo University of Foreign Studies, hoping to contribute to the field of international education. Today, this discussion aims to shed light on heritage appreciation and its place in the K-12 social studies curriculum. It is with great honor that we welcome Sir Brenton Andres to discuss heritage appreciation in K-12 social studies, a glimpse into the curriculum and pedagogy.
So thank you very much, Angel and Mocha. Can I share my screen? Thank you very much. So again, good afternoon to everyone. So I'm Renzo Noy Andres, and I hope that you're all doing fine there in the Philippines. So okay, so na-miss kong mag-present in Filipino. So sana ay hayaan niyo akong magsalita rin in Filipino, mag-code switch during my presentation. So I will present to you, my presentation is about heritage appreciation in K-12 social studies. So to begin with, gusto kong as a teacher, so medyo limited yung ating interaction ngayon sa online mode. So gusto kong magsimula sa isang mini activity. So personal lang naman ito, so by yourself. Makikita ninyo dito yung iba't ibang mga pictures dito sa title page, iba't ibang pictures ng heritage. Okay? So nandyan yung San Sebastian Basilica, hieroglyphic Egyptian wall writing, waves of Kanagawa, Spoliarium, Angkor Wat, Manunggul Jar, isang pyramid sa Mesoamerica, at saka Greek Mask. So, gusto kong gawin ninyo ngayon, isipin ninyo, noong kayo ay elementary or high school, natalakay ba itong mga bagay na ito, itong mga objects na ito, itong mga lugar na ito sa inyong social studies classes? So kung sagot nyo ay oo, edi at least ayun na yung purpose ng aking presentation. Pero ang naiba lang dito, so hindi ko alam kung yung iba sa atin ay inabot yung K-12, yung full implementation ng K-12, marahil yung iba sa simula, naging estudyante ng K-12, yung iba marahil ay hindi na inabot yung K-12. So, yung pinaka-purpose ng aking presentation ay mas bigyang linaw yung current context. Okay? Na paano nga ba na ituturo yung heritage appreciation sa K-12 social studies. Okay, so ito yung magiging outline ng aking presentation. So I'll start with the questions plus methods na ginamit ko dito sa presentation. And then i-discuss yung heritage appreciation, K-12 social studies, heritage appreciation in the curriculum, teaching heritage appreciation, at obstacles and opportunities. So to start with, so ito yung mga questions. Okay, so dito sa aking presentation, 3 questions yung sasagutin natin today. So una, where is heritage appreciation in the K-12 social studies curriculum? So pangalawa, how do social studies teachers teach heritage appreciation in their classes? At pangatlo, what problems are encountered in the teaching of heritage appreciation? So para masagot itong mga questions na ito, so gumamit ako ng ilang methods kagaya ng una, document analysis ng K-12 Araling Panlipunan Curriculum Guide na ipepresent ko rin mamaya. So pangalawa, survey questionnaire na sinagutan ng mga social studies teachers. So bilang isang taon na akong hindi nagtuturo ng social studies bilang lumipat nga ako dito sa Japan, so humingi ako ng tulong sa ilang mga social studies teachers kung paano nga ba nila itinuturo itong topic na ito sa kasalukuyan. So malaki ang aking pagpapasalamat. Taos puso ako nagpapasalamat sa mga teachers na nagsagot at malaki po ang tulong ninyo dito sa presentation na ito at maging sa pag-enlighten sa iba nating mga kababayan kung paano nga ba itinuturo ang heritage appreciation sa social studies classes. Okay. So dumako po tayo ngayon sa heritage appreciation. So ito ay papasadahan ko lang kasi ay intro lang para lang maset natin yung ilang definition ng terms. Yung appreciation feeling ko naman ay understood na ng karamihan sa atin. So pumunta tayo doon sa meaning ng heritage na medyo nabanggit din ng ating mga host kanina, ni Angel ata or ni Mopa. So ano nga ba ang heritage? So ang heritage, according kina De La Fuente, Sainz and Perez, Campbell and Fernandez, ito ay collective roots to our ancestors and their ways of life. So it includes landscapes, scientific, technological, and ethnological. Para naman kina Amet and Ahmad, so it ranges from traditions to oral histories, archaeological sites, museums, remains of industrial activities and lost trades, among many other things. Para kay Batista, so ito ay can be tangible, intangible, or natural. So kanina nabanggit ito ng ating mga hosts. So cultural heritage can be tangible or intangible. Okay, at meron din tayong natural heritage. So dito makikita natin napakalawak ng usapin ng heritage. Okay? At kung titingnan natin dito, hindi lang siya actually sa social studies na ituturo. Okay? Kasi scientific technological lumalabas din siya sa science, diba, sa math. So napakalawak ng scope ng heritage. So dito sa ating presentation ngayon, bilang ang focus natin ay Beyond the Basilica, San Sebastian Basilica. So ang pinaka-focus ng aking presentation ay more on arts and architecture. So heritage pagdating sa arts and architecture. So bakit nga ba mahalaga na ituro ang heritage sa mga bata? So ayon kay Batista, merong 5. Okay, so una, understanding means appreciating. So pangalawa, students will be inspired to connect to their culture. So pangatlo, our future will benefit. Pang-apat, we connect to each other. At pang-5, we can work together to protect cultural heritage. At itong pang-5 yung sinusulong natin ngayong araw. So sama-sama tayo sa pagprotekta ng ating mga cultural heritage. So lalong-lalo na ang San Sebastian Basilica. So ito naman, background sa K-12 social studies. So baka yung iba sa atin ang inabot pa ay yung lumang curriculum na merong grades 1, 2, 3 ay Sibika at Kultura, grades 4, 5 at 6 ay Hekasi, at first year hanggang 4th year high school lumalabas yung social studies o araling panlipunan. So ano nga po ba yung ating scope ng social studies sa ilalim ng K-12? So mula grade 1 hanggang grade 10, ang tawag na po sa kanya ay social studies mismo, araling panlipunan. Okay? Tapos ito yung iba't ibang mga themes. So sa kinder, ang social studies ay integrated pa siya sa ibang mga subjects, hindi siya standalone subject. Okay? Pero basically, ang tinatalakay dito, ako at ang aking kapwa. So pagdating ng grade 1, so eto na, social studies na siya, o araling panlipunan, ako ang aking pamilya at paaralan. Sa grade 2, ang aking komunidad, ngayon at noon. Sa grade 3, okay, so sa grade 3, ang mga lalawigan sa aking rehiyon. Sa grade 4, ang bansang Pilipinas. So makikita natin sa grades 1 to 4, so from grades 1 to 4, dito pumapasok yung expanding communities na concept. So papalawak na pamayanan ng mga bata. So magsisimula sa ako, ang aking pamilya at paaralan, at magtatapos sa bansang Pilipinas. Pagdating sa grade 5 at grade 6, ito na yung Philippine history. So yung Philippine history po ay ibinaba sa elementary. So pagbuo ng Pilipinas bilang nasyon sa grade 5 at magtatapos sa grade 6, mga hamon at tugon sa pagkabansa. Pagdating sa grade 7, lalabas tayo ng Pilipinas. So araling Asyano, grade 8, kasaysayan ng daigdig, grade 9, economics, at grade 10, mga kontemporaryong issue. So ito yung mga tinatalakay sa bawat taon dito sa Araling Panlipunan. Okay? So saan dito pumapasok ngayon yung yung heritage appreciation? Okay? Lalong-lalo na yung pagdating sa arts and architecture. So ito yung sinasabi ko kanina, curriculum guide. Okay? So isa sa mga pages ng curriculum guide ng na prepare ng Department of Education. So makikita natin dito sa taas, so baitang or grade level. And then yung pamantayang pagkatuto, ito yung dapat na matutunan ng mga bata sa loob ng isang taon. And then meron tayong table na i-highlight yung mahalagang parts, halimbawa nilalaman, so yung content, standards, so ano yung dapat na malaman ng bata per quarter, at ano yung dapat na magagawa niya per quarter, at yung pamantayan sa pagkatuto naman, ano yung mga dapat na nagagawa niya per lesson. Okay? So dito, sa pagsusuri, sa analysis nitong curriculum guide. So ang pinakatinignan ko, saan lumalabas dito sa content, sa standards at competencies yung heritage appreciation. So ito yung mga halimbawa. Ito yung mga examples. So for example, sa grade 1, sa content na ako at ang aking kapaligiran, so isa sa mga competencies ay nailalarawan ang pagbabago sa mga istruktura at bagay mula sa tahanan patungo sa paaralan, at natutukoy ang mga mahalagang lugar sa mga istruktura sa mga lugar na ito. So kung titingnan natin marahil sa paglalakad or sa pagko-commute ng bata mula sa bahay patungo sa school, so ano yung mga structures na nakikita niya sa kanyang kapaligiran. Then sa grade 2, sa konteksto ng ang aking komunidad ngayon at noon, so sa history ng kanyang community, so isa sa mga competencies ay naiugnay ang mga sagisag, natatanging istruktura, bantayog ng mga bayani at mga mahalagang bagay na matatagpuan sa komunidad at sa kasaysayan nito. So pagdating naman sa grade 4, ang context ay ang bansang Pilipinas, so sa topic na pagkaakinlan ng kultural or cultural identity, so isa sa mga competencies ay natutukoy ang mga pamanang puok bilang bahagi ng pagkaakinlanlang kulturang Pilipino. At meron din dyan na nakabubuo ng plano na magpapakilala at magpapakita ng pagmamalaki sa kultura ng mga rehiyon sa malikaing paraan. Okay? Pagdating sa grade 7, sa content na mga pagbabago sa Asya, so ilan sa mga competencies ay napahalagahan ang mga kontribusyon ng Asya sa larangan ng sining, humanidades at palakasan. At nahihinuha ang pagkaakinlanlan ng kulturang Asyano batay sa mga kontribusyong ito. Okay? At pagdating naman sa grade 8, heograpiya at mga sinuunang kabiasnan sa daigdig. So nakabubuo ng panukalang proyektong nagsusulong sa pangangalaga at preserbasyon ng mga pamana ng mga sinuunang kabiasnan. So dito naman, mga sinuunang kabiasnan at yung kanilang heritage, mga pamana sa daigdig. So mamaya papakitaan ko kayo ng activity na nagmamatch dito sa standard na ito. So itong mga ito, so yung mga present ko kanina, yan ay mga nakasulat sa papel. Kaya alam naman natin na usually, kung ano yung nakasulat sa paper, hindi naman talaga siya yung lumalabas in real life. Diba? So, doon sa isinagawa kong survey, tinanong ko rin mismo yung mga teachers bilang sila yung nagtuturo. So, tinuturo nyo nga ba ang heritage appreciation? In particular, yung arts and architecture. So yun yung isa sa mga questions. So have you taught heritage appreciation, arts and architecture in particular, in your social studies classes? So doon sa 13 na respondents, so 69% ang sumagot ng yes. 7.7, 8% may nagsabing some content of the lesson involved heritage appreciation. So in a way, yes din yung sagot niya. Okay? At meron namang 23.1% na sumagot ng no. Okay? Pero majority, tinuturo ang arts and architecture. So tinanong ko rin, so among the social studies level that you taught, in which grade levels does heritage appreciation, arts and architecture in particular appear? So makikita natin, siguro ang gusto kong i-highlight dito, hindi yung numbers, kasi baka mamaya, kaya lang maraming grade 7 and grade 8 dito ay dahil mas maraming high school teachers ang nagsagot ng survey. Pero gusto kong i-highlight dito, across all grade levels, social studies grade 1 hanggang grade 10, lumalabas yung heritage appreciation. Ayon sa mga teachers na nagtuturo dito. So ayan, so at least makikita natin, pagdating sa curriculum, so present ang heritage appreciation from grades 1 to grade 10. So paano naman ito tinuturo ng ating mga teachers? So tinanong ko, konting background din sa mga nagsagot ng survey. So natuwa ko kasi at least kalahati naman ay public school, kalahati ay private school. So 13 lamang yung respondents. So ito basically ay hindi siya representative ng buong population ng teachers. Pero ginawa ko yung survey para at least magkaroon tayo ng idea kung paano nga ba ginagawa or tinuturo yung heritage appreciation sa iba't ibang contexts, kagaya ng public school at saka ng private school. So yan. So paano nila tinuturo ang heritage appreciation? So ito yung pinaka-summary. So they do discussion. So merong nag-a-analyze ng pictures and artifacts. They watch videos, documentaries, and films. So meron din mga nagsasagawa ng virtual tours, landmarks, and online museums. At meron din nagpapa-role play at saka modeling. So ito yung summary. So merong ilang mga teachers, bilang survey ito, hindi ako nakapag-follow up question. So may mga teachers na lagay ng specific na ginagawa nila, may mga teachers din na general. So ito yung ilan sa mga highlights ng mga nagsulat ng specific answers. So halimbawa sa grade 1, so sa topic na tayo ay Pilipino, so isa sa mga ginagawa nila, yung mga bata, pinagde-design nila ng sariling bahay kubo. Diba? So grade 1, ang cute lang tignan, diba, na nagde-design sila ng sarili nilang bahay kubo. So pagdating sa grade 4, sa topic ng mga pangkat etno-linguistiko, so ang pinagawa ni teacher, pinag-research niya, pinag-present sa klase, at pinag-model ng damit ng mga indigenous peoples yung mga bata. So Miss Universe, national costume ang labanan dito. So sa grade 5 naman, so sa topic na pananamit, panitikan, sining ng mga sinuunang Pilipino, Philippine history, so ang pinagawa ni teacher, nagpa-analyze ng pictures and artifacts. So mga traditional weaving, musical instruments, ginamit din yung gold of our ancestors ng, ako hindi ako nagkakamali, Ayala Museum. So nagsagawa rin ng docu-watching at film viewing ng Philippine Treasures at saka Kina, the Dream River. So yun yung mga ginawa ni teacher sa pagtuturo nitong topic na ito. Sa grade 8, so sa pagtuturo ng ancient and classical civilizations and Renaissance, so pinag-compare ni teacher yung sa mga students yung Romanesque and Gothic art. Okay? At meron din nagpa-role play sa mga bata bilang art critics on Renaissance paintings. Okay? So yun yung mga strategies na shinare ng mga teachers na ginagawa nila sa pagtuturo ng heritage appreciation. So pinasok ko rin dito sa part na ito yung module. Okay, so ito yung module na ginagamit ng grade 8, so kasaysayan ng daigdig, kung saan itong module naglalaman ng iba't ibang mga content at saka suggested activities sa mga teachers, mga activities na pwede nila ipagawa sa mga bata. So balikan natin kanina yung standard. Okay, sa first quarter, ito yung standard na dapat magagawa ng mga bata, nakabubuo ng panukalang proyekto nagsusulong sa pangangalaga at preserbasyon ng mga pamana ng mga sinuunang kabiasnan sa daigdig. So ano yung suggested activity na magmamatch dito sa standard na ito? So yung nakalagay doon sa module, ito very interesting, preserbasyon ng mga pamana ng mga sinuunang kabiasnan ng daigdig. So anong gagawin ng mga bata? Isiping tagapangulo ka ng National Committee on the Preservation of Cultural Heritage ng iyong bansa na isa sa mga sinuunang kabiasnan sa daigdig. nakatanggap ka ng liham mula sa United Nations na humihingi ng panukalang proyektong may layuning ipreserba ang mga dakilang pamana mula sa iyong bansa. Okay? So hinati sila sa iba't ibang mga pangkat. Merong Iraq, Iran, Egypt, India at China. Okay? At ano ngayon ang gagawin ng mga bata? So kailangan lang sagutin itong questionnaire na ito. So sa unang bahagi, pamagat ng proyekto, saan, petsa ng simula at wakas, halagang gugugulin sa proyekto, at ahensya ng pamahalang kaakibat sa proyekto. Sa ikalawang bahagi, so tungkol saan ang proyekto, mahalaga bang isagawa, sino maikinabang sa paanong paraan. Sa pangatlong bahagi, mga hakbang, ano-ano ang mga dapat gawin, paano makakuha ng salaping gagastusin, sino at paano sasanayin ang mga tauhan, ano-ano ang mga kagamitan upang magawa. Okay? At sa ika-4 na bahagi, ano-ano ang mga inaasahang bunga o resulta. So ano ang nais mong sabihin upang maging matagumpay? Okay? Ano ang itsura ng kalalabasan ng gagawing proyekto? So very interesting itong activity. Kung hindi ako nagkakamali, ito yung performance task o main project ng first quarter. Very interesting siya kasi ay sinasimulate sa mga bata yung pagiging bahagi ng isang committee, so marahil ng isang NGO, ng isang private organization, paano maging art or heritage conservationist. So may mga ganitong pinapagawa sa mga bata. So pero ito nga lang ay suggested activity, so na kay teacher pa rin kung ito mismo yung gagawin niya or mag-a-adopt siya ng ibang activity. So pero ito nakalagay ito sa module na ginagamit ng public school. So marahil may mga teachers na gumagawa nito sa iba't ibang bahagi ng Pilipinas. Sa amin naman sa UPIS nung ako'y nagtuturo pa doon, isa sa mga ginagawa namin in relation sa heritage appreciation, sa grade 7 na saklaw ang ASA, so ang Asian Studies, nagsasagawa kami ng temple tour. So yung aming mga grade 7 teachers, sila ay nag-aasikaso. And then kaming Department ng Social Studies ay sumasama at sumusuporta. So itong mga bata dinadala namin sa iba't ibang mga temple sa Maynila, okay, mga Asian religious temples. So nagpunta kami dito sa Taoist Temple at saka sa Hindu Temple sa Manila. At ito naman ay Sikh Temple sa Marikina. So sa pagpunta dito sa mga temples na ito, hindi lang na i-explain sa bata yung beliefs ng religion, kundi nakikita rin nila firsthand yung sining, yung arkitektura, yung arts and architecture na meron itong mga religion na ito. At ano yung connection, ano yung philosophy sa likod ng architecture ng sining, paano na i-relate sa beliefs ng religion na ito. So yan. So makikita natin pagdating sa pagtuturo, iba't ibang pamamaraan yung ginagamit. So nagre-range mula sa discussion hanggang sa experiential learning. So ano ngayon yung mga obstacles and opportunities? So tinanong ko yung mga teachers, did you encounter any problems in the teaching of heritage appreciation? So 60% sumagot ng yes, 40% sumagot ng no. Okay? So ano-ano yung mga sinagot ng mga yes. Okay? So para sa kanila, unang problem ay materials. Okay? So hindi easily accessible yung mga materials. So which is valid naman talaga. Pangalawa, pagdating sa students, nahihirapan sila sa ibang students kasi ay they lack necessary skills, toolkit or lens. So marahil ay hindi pa masyadong mature yung mga bata para maintindihan yung activity or yung mismong meaning behind the architecture or the art. Meron ding nahihirapang mag-draw ng connection sa pagitan ng estudyante at sa kanong material. So pinaka-challenge yung paano ipaparealize sa mga bata na relevant itong heritage na ito. Okay? At dapat may pakialam tayo dito. So meron din mga teachers na nahirapan sa language barrier. So marahil may mga batang sanay pa rin sa pagsasalita ng English. So challenge ang pagtuturo ng Filipino pagdating sa social studies. So pangatlong aspects ng obstacles ay yung delivery. So sa time allotment, so challenge yung time allotment kasi ang social studies ay 2 to 3 hours lang siya per week. Okay? Tapos yung mismo heritage appreciation, hindi naman siya standalone topic, kundi integrated din siya sa ibang mga topics. So challenge yon kay teachers, challenge yon sa mga teachers. Gayon din, challenge din very recently yung online learning, okay, na dahil sa COVID-19. So uh, sina teacher na hirapan sa paghahanap ng websites, ng applications na gagamitin sa pagtuturo ng mga topics na related sa heritage appreciation. Gayon din, kung nahihirapan na nga silang engage sa mga bata sa face-to-face classes, so mas challenge din ngayon yung pag-engage sa mga bata sa online classes. So bagaman merong mga problems, may mga obstacles, meron din namang mga opportunities. So isa sa mga hinighlight nung nakausap kong teacher, hindi niya inaituro yung heritage appreciation sa junior high school, pero naituro niya ito sa senior high school classes. So in particular, yung understanding culture, society, and politics at sa contemporary Philippine arts in the region. So nagpunta pa nga raw sila sa National Museum. So dahil ilan yon sa mga kailanganin sa requirements or sa pwedeng activities na ipagawa under these subjects. So yung iba sa inyo, baka bilang marami sa inyo ay art majors, so baka may interesado rin na magturo ng contemporary Philippine arts in the region. So ito yung sample na, ito yung isang bahagi ng kanyang curriculum guide. So ano yung tinuturo dito sa contemporary Philippine arts from the regions? So significant contemporary artists from the regions. So yung mga national artists, mga gawad sa manilikha ng bayan, at sa iba't ibang larangan. So yun. So makikita natin itong mga opportunities na ito. Gayon din, siguro gusto ko rin kunin itong opportunity na ito bilang yun nga, marami sa ating mga audience ngayon ay art majors, art experts. So kung meron po kayong alam ng mga bagay, ng mga resources na makakatulong sa ating mga teachers, very open naman po, okay, ang ating mga teachers. So nasa teachers ang content, nasa teacher yung pedagogy, pero ngayon mas nangangailangan sila ng resources. So kung meron po kayong maitutulong, may offer, so very, very open po, okay, to suggestion ng ating mga teachers. So malaki po ang maitutulong ng inyong suggestions para sa mas ikagaganda, mas ika-relevant ng heritage appreciation sa social studies education. Okay, so to summarize, balikan natin yung tatlong tanong na pinost ko sa simula ng talk. So una, where is heritage appreciation in the K-12 social studies curriculum? So makikita natin na present siya in social studies 1 to 10, especially in lessons on geography, history, and culture. At present din siya in some core senior high school subjects kagaya nga nung understanding culture, society, and politics, and contemporary arts from the regions. So how do social studies teachers teach heritage appreciation in their classes? So makikita natin, it ranges from discussion. So merong active learning na maraming activities na pinapagawa sa mga bata hanggang sa experiential learning. So pinaparanas sa kanila yung mismong heritage. At panghuli, what problems are encountered in the teaching of heritage appreciation? So andyan yung materials, okay, challenges sa materials, challenges sa students, at saka challenges sa delivery. So to end this talk, gusto kong i-quote yung sinabi ni Soininen, Santa Cana, and Lodge na a society that underestimates its cultural legacy, both material and immaterial, is an immature society which will allow it to continue to be destroyed or manipulated. So in behalf of the social studies teacher, so kaisa niyo po kami sa pagtuturo, hindi lang sa pag-appreciate, kundi maging sa pagprotekta at pangangalaga ng ating cultural heritage. So yun lamang po at marami pong salamat.
Thank you so much, Sir Branson. I really hope more and more students learn about heritage appreciation in school.
Moving on, let us now introduce our second speaker, Architect Harvey Vasquez. Architect Harvey Vasquez is a licensed architect in the Philippines with 16 years of experience ranging from renowned local firms to international offices. Both his extensive knowledge in architecture and his expertise as head of Studio Now and co-founder of Kalamaang Design Studio will emerge in his discussion today. After setting up Kalamaang Design Studio, a private practice with Joan Vasquez, an interior designer herself, the pair took on a breadth of projects from interior interventions of micro to macro scale. Kalamaang Design Studio currently boasts a combined 32 years of unwavering capacity working on commercial and private commissions. Currently, the studio is in the middle of the pre restoration process of the architectural heritage conservation of the Abbey of Our Lady of Montserrat, San Beda Church in Mendiola. Architect Harvey Vasquez acquired his master's degree in architecture with a major in architectural heritage at the University of the Philippines. He is also currently the chairperson of the architecture program in the LaSalle College of St. Benilde. It is with great honor that we welcome Architect Harvey Vasquez to speak about the best practices in heritage architecture and conservation architectural documentation.
Thank you, Mocha, for that wonderful introduction, and also Angel. So I will be sharing my screens to start off. All right. So good afternoon, everyone. Sir Branson gave a great introduction into how our students and the new generation of Filipinos are introduced to our heritage culture. So in my talk, I will be tackling a more um, tangible part of how we can protect our heritage culture. So one important aspect and one best practice is architectural documentation. So what is architectural documentation? So it's a compilation of both graphic and written records, and it illustrates significant characteristics of a historical building, site, structure, or object. So it forms a graphical record, um, either as a photograph, also and drawings. So for photographs, contemporary and historic photographs are actually important in assessing a sites for a building's cultural importance. So just before I start the talk, I would just like to reiterate why architectural documentation is important. First of all, architectural documentation allows us to understand the structure of cultural importance, and it after that it allows us to appreciate this particular building, which in turn gives us more participation, and depending on the stakeholders, it creates ownership on the particular building, and then after that, it creates a better or sustainable conservation practice. Because if the stakeholders are involved and take ownership on the particular structure that we are conserving, the process would be more sustainable because you don't have to force people to participate. They are really invested because they understand and because they appreciate the particular building that we are restoring. So this goes back to the previous discussion with Sir Branson in terms of how do we reinforce that importance, and how do we inculcate our heritage into our new generation. So architectural documentation helps in that matter in terms of creating a direct participation for our stakeholders. So in this talk, I will be showing examples of particular documentations, and to also give you a glimpse of a sort of working documents and how we encounter and how we process information. So this gives us a good indication on what it entails to do a architectural heritage conservation. So for historic photographs, of course, we, especially with the advent of internet, we run across a lot of historic photographs, and this is an example of a photograph of the old Escolta here in Manila. So in from the point of view of a heritage conservator, this could be part of a important document in terms of a context study of the area. So if you are, for example, restoring this particular building, it would give you a great idea on in terms of its scale, its position, and also the architecture that it is surrounded with. So this is an important exercise in um, in finding out proper context for the architecture or the building that we are overseeing the restoration. Of course, part of the investigation is historic drawings. The first part of architectural heritage documentation is what we term as death work. So these are work that could be done without going to the actual site. So we do our research first to map out what are the available information for that particular building. And usually, without going to the actual building, the available information that would be found for the particular building is through historic photographs, and also, if you are lucky, we can find historic drawings as well. So the historic drawings are different from what we're accustomed to, especially in architecture. Wherein in architecture, we actually have drawings that we do before the construction, and the drawings that we do after the construction, which is as built, and then that's our reference. But in some cases, a lot of our heritage buildings don't have those drawings. So oftentimes, the historic drawings are our only reliable sources in terms of the authenticity of the facade, the 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 material that was used, and a lot of these historic drawings are made in situ or after the fact, after construction, but it is not a traditional architectural document. So there's no measurement. Usually it gives just the facade, but that is what we are dealing when it comes to heritage buildings, the lack of information. So architectural documentation becomes really important in that sense, especially if we want to maintain the building, or if we want the building to be restored in latter time. So architectural documentation is not just important for buildings that are up for renovation or up for restoration. Architectural renovation is also applicable for buildings that are with important cultural value. So we don't have to wait for them to be restored or renovated for us to create a architectural documentation. So I think we all remember what happened to Bohol in 2013, wherein it was struck by an earthquake of I think 5.3 magnitude. So there are a lot of important cultural churches that were destroyed. So if not for prior investigations on architectural prior documentation of the buildings, we will not be able to restore the destroyed buildings as faithful as possible. So this is what we are also teaching the community, to begin this process as early as possible. So in architectural documentation, what we termed as measure drawings, of course, are 2D line drawings that follow our standard drafting conventions that portrays 2D and 3D dimensional structure, similar to as-built architectural drawings, except that they are generally produced years after the structure is built. Portray conditions at the time of documentation, including accretions, alterations, and deletions that have occurred on the original. Accurate, detailed scale drawings that portray or interpret the significant features of the recorded structures on a standardized format for archival. So the important thing to understand when we talk about architectural documentation is it should not be perfect, because the buildings that we are documenting is actually already showing its years, and in some cases the walls are already flawed. There were already extensions. So in some cases, depending on the building, when we do our documentation, when we do our measured drawings, we do it by hand, because it is easier for us to reflect those inconsistencies. Kasi when we do drawings in CAD, I think I see a lot of our architectural students here watching the talk now. When you do drawings through CAD, it's always a straight line. And in a architectural building, in a heritage building, it's not always the case. The walls are not always straight. The, the floors are not always straight. It's because of the age and because of the previous technologies that are now considered subpar. This is also one of the reasons why our usual standards for buildings are not really 100% applied to our heritage buildings. So there's a certain sense of fragility to these buildings. So that makes architectural documentation more urgent in that sense. So this is an example of a architectural documentation of a measured building. Now we are lucky that we have available tools in our disposal that can create accurate drawings like this. So this is a laser scan converted into a 2D drawing of the Abbey of Montserrat in San Beda, Mendiola. It's the facade. So as you can see, it's already generated in AutoCAD and converted into a flat file. But on site, it was a measured drawings that was taken through laser scanning. So one by one, the team did laser scanning and then converted the file into this file. So this is an important file for us moving forward in terms of assessing the building and how do we approach the conservation. So if you can see the building already, it's converted into our as-built drawings, the same format that we see in a contemporary building. So it's a great help for understanding and reading the plans for buildings like this. So I gave a brief background already on the purpose of documentation, but to explain in depth, it's to explain and illustrate the building. So that's basically it, no vanilla about it. It's sort of how we can, the more we can describe the building in terms of photos, in terms of historical research, in terms of the drawings, the better would be our chance to create a authentic and proper conservation for the building. So part of the documentation that we are relying on, not just for photos and drawings, are also documents. So documents like written records. So the written records are historical research that are performed in sort of chronological order and context of structure, and then descriptive based on the inspection of the physical fabric of the building, site, and structure. So um, we can view this as sort of historical research is more on desk work, and then descriptive is field work. I will show you a few examples mamaya on how we apply field work for architectural documentation. Yeah. So this is an example of a historical research or historical document, in particular from San Beda, um, it, uh, a historical photograph of the church interior from 1939. So this gives us a context on what um, how does it look like previously. So in first glance, we would already notice some of the differences. For example, um, for some of you that were able to visit San Beda, you would see that this um, marble um, sort of like a separation is not there anymore. So this was taken out, I think, after in the 80s, and then chairs were added in this area. So in that sense, this image gives us a good indication of how it would look like without those chairs and with this marble separator. So it adds to the layer of context for the particular documentation. Okay, and then we also do actual observations. So this is that same um, altar sanctuary area, but we added or we installed scaffoldings for our experts to be able to get a closer view of the paintings that we will be restoring. Also get a better view of the retablo. We will also be restoring to give a better so that our plan for restoration would be more in tune on the existing conditions. Yeah. So how do we plan a architectural documentation process? So the first part is the initial literature. So I showed you a while ago photographs and then historic drawings that are available for that particular structure. So what we do is we gather that first to create a sort of repository of data. So this gives us a sense of what is available and then what is still lacking. What are the things that we still need to find or we still need to have in order to get a cohesive picture of what we're working on. So the second part of that is after we create this repository, now we know the blanks that needs to be filled. So we try our best to fill in those blanks through fieldworks. So the fieldworks are usually divided into three photographs. So this is different, of course, with the historical photographs. Photographs in field, in situ, just like what I showed you a while ago, is an important process in trying to ascertain its current condition. Visual survey, analysis of failures, analysis of what is the current problematic areas of the structure is done through survey. And then we go back again to historical research. So historical research is mainly important in terms of tying up all this information that can be palatable for the stakeholders, the community, and narrative that could be relatable and could be also appreciated by the community. Okay, so in the initial literature, identification of repositories of data reviews with general sources are available. We have, of course, access to archives. We have a national archives that is housed inside the National Library. Important structures would also have their own internal archives. Just like what I showed you in San Beda, they have their own local museum inside San Beda, and they also have their own archives inside that we can peruse in terms of building up our database for that particular structure. And then we can also rely on the internet. Internet has been a great source and a great asset for heritage conservators in terms of being able to access collections of archives that are based outside the Philippines. So a lot of the, for example, a lot of the Filipiniana collections from Michigan University is made available through online as they have already scanned a lot of the documents and put them up online. The difficulty with in this process is that you have to learn the language. In some cases, documents are in Spanish language, and in handwritten documents sometimes are difficult to understand. So that is the trade-off. So particularly here in the Philippines, our archival research is not our strength because we are struggling with the language barrier. And also to identify written data on an area or an individual resource, generally expanded to include photographs, drawings, and other materials of nonverbal nature. So sometimes essays about the area are also relevant. Oral records about the area, oral stories pertaining to the area are also relevant and in some cases important to create or to add to the cache of information. Yeah. So number two, what I said kanina is if we view that on part one, on the initial literature, there are a lot of still missing data that will be important for our decision-making process on the conservation, then fieldwork is something that is undeniable or something that we cannot avoid. And for me, it's actually part of the exciting. It's an exciting part of the process as we get to really be up close and up close on the building details, being able to touch and being able to access point of views that are previously not available. For example, when I showed you the scaffoldings that we put up in front of the retablo, on a normal times without scaffoldings, you wouldn't be able to come as close as that to admire and observe the retablo of the Ave Montserrat in San Beda. So that gives us a privileged view of that structure. And to develop information needed by others, a survey develops data for planners, government officials, and other decision makers, provides the kind of data needed to plan for preservation as a part of future development and growth. So what I've been discussing from start and up to now are still process that we do before we do the restoration. These are things that we do as part of the pre-restoration process. We don't do restoration without doing the architectural documentation. As I said a while ago and in the start of my talk, it's important to understand what we're dealing with. And without architectural documentation, we will not have that in-depth understanding. So it's really critical that we go through the process of architectural documentation before we do any intrusive process on the building. So field work comes in three areas, of course, photos, visual survey, and historical research. So it always goes back to this research component. And for me as an architect, that usually works in the field of the built environment, heritage conservation is a totally different field because it's not always building things from the ground up. And that makes it exciting for me working as an architect that builds building as well and does restoration. It gives me a different point of view on how to tackle buildings, what makes context important, and in some cases drawings become important. So it gives me a better appreciation of what architecture could be and what should be. So photographic survey is a complement to measured drawings and historical photographs, that what the ones I showed you before. So now that we've advanced also our technology, photographic survey is not just in 2D. Photographic survey could also entail three-dimensional qualities. We now have laser scan that lets you create 360-degree views. So in some cases, for important architectural buildings, you are able to preserve a sort of virtual reality file that you can come in, explore, and observe digitally. So we have already come this far in terms of our capabilities of documentation. And manual drawings are nowadays um, more rare, especially with the scale of buildings that we are looking at. So we are now more reliant on scanning technologies that can do um, 99% accuracy of the drawings. Because when you talk about laser scanning, whatever the laser touches, it documents. So even the plants that were there, you have to just clean it up afterwards. So it's that level of accuracy that we're looking at. So we can now create three-dimensional qualities on our surveys and spatial relationships. And of course, what's important for us in the field is current conditions, texture, and content. So this gives us a very good um, agency into the inner workings of the building, because especially for architectural for heritage buildings, from afar you would see na, okay, everything is in order, the building looks stable, the building looks in shape. Actually, when you look closer and when you look at spaces that are not supposed to that you're not afforded when you are on the ground, it gives you a better understanding. Okay, the building is actually struggling. The building has a lot of problem areas already that we need to urgently to answer. So, and so also texture and content to provide technically good and aesthetically pleasing photographs is of course another requirement for photographic survey. And then to provide photographs that convey the importance of the structure and give enough information for the viewers to make their own analysis of the resources. Yeah. So this is an example of the survey that we do. This is a scaffolding that is almost 3 story high to access this particular painting, which was the start of our restoration process. This painting is damaged, as you can see by the submaterial, by the backing of the canvas that's already peeling off. So this creates a dangerous situation and concern for the church. So that's why the pre-restoration process was called on in terms of trying to understand why this happened and will this happen to the other paintings. Because we have 16 of these paintings that are in the ceiling. So the scaffoldings afforded us a closer look, and eventually we had to take down this painting for us to really have a better understanding. And in this case, because the painting is already flawed because of its backing, it gave us a chance to restore the painting and then to change the material for the backing. As expected for this kind of paintings that were done during the 60s. The backing was the backing material is in, oh, I forgot the material. So it's not in plywood. I forgot this. It's like a coco husk material. It's in the tip of my tongue. I'll come back to that. Yeah. So condition survey is part of the documentation phase of the conservation building. Condition survey serves as the basis of intervention. So this is our sort of roadmap on what we will do in the restoration process. And wall conditions and morphology are mapped in the condition survey. Cracks, biological growth, and other relevant information are mapped and overlaid on scale drawings or rectified photo. So when I was studying in UP, we did a few of this conservation condition survey. And in some cases, it's really tiring because we do it from morning until evening, and we are hanging on scaffoldings while we're looking at the walls themselves. So I'll show you an example. So this is an example of a condition mapping. This is from our friends on Escuela Taller. I believe this is in Angeles, Pampanga. So it's an elevation wherein the stones that need to be removed are also mapped. And the cracks that are present at that particular area of the building are also mapped. So this is the level of detail that we go through before we do anything or before we do our restoration. And this is important. This is important for us to share not only to the community, but also to the stakeholders and also the heritage conservation community at large to sort of serve as a best practice or an example in terms of a teaching moment on why and how we do this. This is an example that we strive for, this level of detail. So imagine doing the whole church, all four sides, doing this kind of survey from all regions of the walls. So we did this, I think, in Tacloban, and it gives a more comprehensive story of the building and its experience so far. So we also have to map where are the biological growth placed. We also, of course, the cracks, the 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 stones that need to be replaced will also be there. So it gives a um, comprehensive look on the building. So it completes the story. So in this case naman, we were documenting the painting. So when we document the painting, we just like the cracks on the walls that Escuela Taller did, we will be doing regions for the paintings, and then we will analyze the paintings per region. So this is what they were doing here. For example, we always have a piece of paper wherein we map each particular region. For example, for them, they would be gridded in a, so this would be gridded into a, let's say, 1 by 1 grid. So each member of the team would be given a grid, and then he will analyze that particular region. So that is the level of detail that is required for this kind of process. So what are we looking at when we do our survey, when we do our condition survey, and when we do our overall architectural documentation? What are the things that we need to look out for? So we are creating a description of the structure that is the object of the research. And the present appearance of the structure should always be documented in written history. It should not only relate what a structure looks like, but also qualify that appearance. Important characteristics of a building should be identified and defined. So in terms of architectural students, I think they understand this sort of definitions. So we go through the massing of the building, of course, shape, scale, rhythm, size, materials, fenestrations, roof shapes and materials, structural systems, texture, site, building style, and building type. So these are important considerations for our buildings. And of course, this would feed into the narrative, the overall narrative of the historical research. So I only have 9 minutes to go. Yeah. So as a general rule, when we encounter or when we're doing our historical research, the more significant the building, the shorter the significance statement. Sabihin, if the building is recognized not just by its stakeholder, when I say stakeholder, it's community. If the building is recognized by not just by the community but the nation at large, then the significance statement of the building is shorter because you don't have to further justify or create intensive analysis just to state its significance. For example, everyone in the Philippines, or at least in Manila, knows that the Manila Cathedral is an important cultural structure. So it has gone through multiple wars and it has gone through multiple iterations as well. So it becomes easier for us to create that statement of significance. Statement of significance naman is important as a sort of byproduct of architectural documentation because it further justifies the process. It further justifies the level of attention that is put on to that particular building. Yeah, so in research, history of structure, present appearance, and then that would lead to analysis, that would lead to synthesis, and then we will be able to create that statement of significance. So the usual composition of a statement of significance is, of course, the historical narrative, which will be coming from the research, as well as the architectural documentation. So those are the two things that mainly compose the statement of significance. Okay, last bits of remarks on architectural documentation. Architectural documentation is essentially is essential as it ensures reversibility. So we have to understand restoration, architectural restoration should be reversible. Reversibility should always be remembered when we're doing architectural conservation. Bakit? Because it's important to create a facility that can be reversible so that when a better technology or a better methodology comes in, we can still go back and take out the previous restoration and then create a better method for that restoration. So this is an important factor in our documentation because documentation also allows us to identify what was intervened with on this year, what was intervened with on this year. So we have to also create that morphology of the structure, the sort of evolution of that structure. And then in our investigation, the community by large, together with guidance of the architectural conservator, would be able to decide what we think and what we feel is the authentic feature of the structure. And that is important in restoration. At the same time, that identification will be our takeoff for our restoration. So reversibility is important so that we can still go back and change in the future. So in discussing this process, we can only assume that architectural heritage conservation is a long and deliberate process. So, wag nating madaliin. Mahaba talaga siya. And then I was showing a few documents in our process on San Beda. We are still in our pre-restoration phase. We started 2017 in terms of our investigation, and we still haven't done anything. We are still basically just investigating the building, investigating its context, investigating the best possible method moving forward when we actually do the restoration process. So it will take time, and it should take time. And it's advisable that we don't rush into restoration without the proper context, without the proper details and data that we need to perform the restoration properly. And then, because restoration takes time, involvement of the local community is essential to its success. And I will commend San Sebastian for being understanding this sort of mantra, because they have been involving the local community from the start of the process, and the local community has already organically grown into this huge support system that the church is relying on. And this is an important process in the architectural conservation, because it gives you the formula for success for conservation, because the primary stakeholders are involved, the primary stakeholders understand and appreciate the buildings that you are restoring. In turn, they have this sort of ownership. So the administrations can change, the parish council can change, but the main stakeholder is the one of the things that are constant on site. They would always be there. So it's great that they are also involved and they're also participating. So the process becomes sustainable. And this is what I'm saying. Local community needs to be a vital part of the process, as they will more likely see through the long process of architectural heritage conservation. So the sense of ownership will build through the direct participation of the local community. So this is what we are also attempting in San Beda. Even though it's a more private institution, we are from the start directly involving the community, which is the abbey. So they are aware of each and every step that we take. So every month we do updates on what happened, what is happening, what are the things that they are expecting. So in a way, they are also abreast in terms of the process that is ongoing for their particular church. So this is an important remark to remember when we are faced with architectural restoration. And then, of course, the sources. The main source is lectures from our my former mentor in UP, Sir Jojo Mata. So thank you.
Thank you, Architect Vasquez, for sharing your knowledge and insights on architectural documentation.
Now, let me introduce our next speaker for today, Ms. Samantha Pacardo. Samantha Pacardo is the Fundraising and Communications Manager of San Sebastian Basilica Foundation, the organization leading the overall restoration of Asia's only all-metal church. Together with the team, she oversees the foundation's social media, press, and other programs with the goal of making the work more accessible, approachable, and sustainable. She was once the community development manager of the foundation, and she helped co-create the Bukas Quiapo Tours, Quiapo's first community-based heritage tour. She graduated with an MA in Development Studies and a minor in History from Ateneo de Manila University. Prior to working in the heritage field, she worked in Akawain University in Morocco, and Ateneo de Manila University with local social enterprises. It is with great honor that we welcome Ms. Samantha Pacardo to discuss empowering your online community, the hashtag Save San Sebastian campaign during quarantine.
Okay. Thank you so much, Angel, for the introduction. Um, okay, we're gonna try remote control right now. Hopefully, it will work with us. Okay. So thank you to the team of Benilde Arts Management for partnering with us at San Sebastian, especially now since we are in the middle of the Save San Sebastian campaign. And also, of course, thank you to Professor Benson and Architect Vasquez for your talks prior to this, because I think it really set the foundation for what we'll be discussing for this talk. So uh, I will go to the next slide. Isabel. Okay, there we go. So I wanted, since what I'll be talking about in this presentation is how we approach communication in general and how we've applied that approach to the ongoing campaign. And it's a good place for us to start, or a good place for us to start would be the statement of significance, which comes from the foundation's conservation management plan. And it's really from this that everything emanates. And so it informs the work that we do across the board. So for the tech team and for the fundraising end, this is why we do the work. It's because we need to make sure that San Sebastian is safe to use and that the OAR can continue their ministry and can continue to spread the devotion to Our Lady of Mount Carmel. But then on the side of communications, this is really what we aim to communicate through different means. So next slide. There we go. Sorry. If you could go back to the left prior to this. There we go. Okay. There we go. So here in this slide, I think this is what people normally think of when they hear about the restoration. It's this work. So what you'll see here, this was quite early on last month. The tech team was building the customized, or they were putting together, the customized scaffolding for the restoration of the dome. So this is really one part of the work that the foundation is doing. It's the technical restoration. So under the in-house technical team, they work with different groups. So for example, architect Melvin Patawaran, who is the lead architect for that, with Shira, they work with structural engineers, they work with people abroad. So it's a whole other arm of the foundation. But what you're actually looking at, this material, this square, is the product of our team. So next slide. So that's mainly our job. Our job is to filter and translate the work of the technical team and make it easily understood, palatable, something that people can actually engage with. And we're hoping that sometimes people find them funny. We've gotten a lot of feedback about the Ming Ming, the hidden Ming Mings inside our social media posts. So next slide, please. There we go. So as we're working to filter all the information that comes from the technical team, sometimes it also comes from the OAR, or the Order of Agustinian Recollects themselves, specifically the Archivo Recoleto under Father Kilatan. So there's a lot of information for San Sebastian, which we're very lucky to have because we don't have a lack of documentation for the Basilica. So we try to filter and translate all of that information into something that people can easily understand and grasp. And so we have different kinds of materials. So last year, well, we all know that that's when quarantine started. we found that to be an opportunity for us to really grow our online presence and think about how can we make San Sebastian closer to people at home. So we try to experiment with different types of content and formats. So this is a slice of what we had last year as we were experimenting. And it was all under this We Learn as One campaign. Because for us, we were viewing it with the idea that everyone is stuck at home and we still needed to find a way to make San Sebastian available to them and useful to them. So some of my personal favorites would be the Visita Baste, because for us, we have a lot of people who are really going to San Sebastian because of the spiritual importance of San Sebastian. And so we were able to sort of break down the different images that are in San Sebastian and kind of give them an idea of where it is, what it's about. We also did this, which is Kilalang Quiapense. So we actually had two parts, but this one is my particular favorite because we were able to talk to people in Quiapo and ask them through our tour guide for Bukas Quiapo about the things that they wanted to share with people outside of Quiapo, what makes it important. And then moving to the right, you can see that there's a progression to more interactive materials. So this one would be the backgrounds. So we made backgrounds of San Sebastian available to people if they would still like to visit it during Visita Iglesia. And then this one might be something that Professor Benson and his co-teachers would be interested in, because we wanted to also cater to parents who had kids who were stuck at home. So we actually looked at the curriculum for grade 1 students, and we learned that under second quarter, they have to talk about colors. So what we did was we created free activity sheets featuring the windows of San Sebastian with like a little description so that parents can print those out at home. They can color them, they can explain a little bit about the basilica, and they still kind of hit that requirement for second quarter. And then something that we also tried to do was a restoration station, which we finished the first season, I would say. The first season, this was available on Spotify for a few months. And so what we did for Restoration Station was that we spoke with our experts, the architects, the engineers, the people who did the conservation management plan, to kind of get to know them more, their backgrounds, and hopefully inspire more people to also become heritage practitioners in the future. So that's something that I hope we can revisit. Next slide. So where are we, or San Sebastian online? So in terms of the communication, we still do traditional media. And I'm very thankful for the Benilde team, because I know how difficult that is to send out PR kits and have to follow up and collect them when they're done. I mean, that's still something that we value. But at the same time, we also are moving towards expanding our online presence. Just because, as you can see from this, these are all of the platforms that we use. You can see that there's so much more that we can do online. And I think that's really what we try to lean on, is that we just need to keep trying to figure out how can we best communicate the use of the church, the importance of the church to people through different platforms. And I'm sure, since most of you are students, you're aware that what you share on Facebook is not what you share on Instagram or YouTube or Twitter. There are all of these things. And so it helps us think about what aspects of the church work best for certain platforms. And one of our more recent ones, since we also do the fundraising, is the online shop. So I'll get to that more later on. Okay, so just to expand on the reason why we do why we have a lot or we put in a lot of effort for online presence is because, again, it goes back to the use. We want people to be able to interact and use the information that we have, because we have so much. We're so lucky to have so much information coming in from the experts, from the priests themselves, the friars themselves, of what they want to tell other people. And so we want to be able, or we want that our material is, oh, sorry, there, is accessible to a wider audience, both local and abroad. And I just want to take a moment here to also mention that when we're talking about accessibility, we do try as much as we can to expand that definition, because we're very aware of how language plays into this. That if you noticed, if any of you follow us, if you notice that we try to make our materials available in English and Tagalog. But we're working now, especially hopefully with the order, about how can we translate the materials into, let's say, um, Bisaya or Hiligaynon or other languages, maybe even Spanish, because of course the OAR, they are very much still connected with Spain, and that's where they came from. So we're trying to also work that out. And even bandwidth, I think that's something that we also have to talk about, because not everyone has the same data capacity. And I'm talking about like this online. We're also thinking about how can we make the materials accessible to people who might not live near areas that have very good signals. So we're trying to keep all of those levels, those layers in mind. We also want to discover new ways to engage with this type of creative content. So like, I think at the beginning, it was a bit of a hard sell for us to do the podcast, but I think we got a lot of good feedback from that. So it's just a lot of experimentation for us. And of course, educate and update people about the restoration, the fundraising, and the programs. But I think Isabel will be able to talk more about that as the head of educations. And then for us as well, we also see as the advantage of it is that we can do the fundraising online, which is great, especially now that we can't really go out. And so we can open our platforms to people, to other local makers, and try to find a way to still connect with them. And also, hopefully it's a beneficial partnership. And of course, for us, we have the insights and direct input about, from the audience. I'm mentioning this because I think, I don't know if it's for everyone, but some people think that having the social media aspect or having social media is a lot of guessing work. I mean, there is some guesswork in the sense that you have to be open to experimentation with what you put out and being creative with it. But if ever any of you will eventually handle the social media accounts of museums or other places, you have to look into that little button on the side that says insights, because that will give you a lot of information about who you're talking to and how to best talk to them. And that's something that we try our best to integrate into the things we do. We try to have those evaluations within the year to kind of recalibrate and think about how is the information relevant to the people that we're talking to. Okay. And so we get to the meat of it, which is the Save San Sebastian campaign. So why do we need the campaign? Okay. So I think, I'm not sure if many of you are aware about what's happening in San Sebastian, but for us, last September 2020, people started messaging us again about, over social media, about this condo building that was scheduled for construction behind San Sebastian. And it only made sense from there that we needed to make our online community a part of this campaign, that it couldn't just live internally and be between the foundation, the order, and the legal team. We needed to find a way to include the people around us, because their public support and hopefully your public support will, you know, will still make a difference. And it's just as important as all the things that the lawyers are doing. And of course, for us, we were very lucky because the campaign itself, meaning the change.org, was actually started by a member of the parish. We were just surprised that there was this campaign happening and it was gathering signatures. And then we ended up talking to that person and then collaborating with them and telling them, you know, we hope that we can work with you so that we can expand this call to action with, of course, the backing of the Order of Augustinian Recollects. And so what we're asking now for this campaign is not just to support the opposition to the condo building that's scheduled less than, I think it's about 75 meters away from San Sebastian, just behind it. Not just for that, but also to support the ongoing restoration, because those things are very much entwined with each other. So what do we hope to achieve with this campaign? So first, we want to educate the community. And when we say community, this is in a very broad term. This is the immediate community around San Sebastian. And this is also the online community. So it's a wide net. We want to be able to, of course, provide them the correct information about what is happening. And I think a story for that would be a lot of early on. I also saw, sorry, I just saw the flash of someone's comment that it reminded them of Torre de Manila, which is perfect because when the news first broke out, I think that was after we released the first official statement from the foundation, a lot of people or a lot of news outlets ended up picking up on the story, and then it was, you know, everyone was comparing it to Torre de Manila. And I think that was the part when, you know, we decided that we needed to make a concerted effort, a very clear effort to educate people and explain why it's not just about the photo bomber, why the issue of San Sebastian is not just about the photo bomber, and what does that mean. And so we ended up, you know, making things like this on this side, the leftmost square, which is a common hazard. So we took the information from the lead structural engineer, Dr. Lisandro Garciano from Petrojican, and then we took his talk and then made it into this little square that hopefully helps people understand a little better why it's important to save San Sebastian and why it's about safety just as much or maybe even more than it is about the photo that you're taking of San Sebastian. And so we've been still talking to media. So like I said, it's very important to have still the traditional media because of course print is still there and it's important because they have their own audiences, but also having these conversations. So we're very thankful to Benilde for having this Beyond the Basilica, because talks like this allow us to really break down the different layers and aspects of the campaign. So what I'm talking about right now is just the communication. And if you would like to know more about what is happening straight from the legal team, from the structural engineer, from the side of the priests, from the archive administrator of why it's important, and of course from our executive director, Claire Vitog. We just recently had Heritage Talk, so all of the videos are available on our Facebook. I highly suggest you watch that and have them explain it on what are the different aspects, if you're interested. And then part of the community, sorry, I'm just gonna double check the time. Okay, part of the community, educating the community, is also getting people to focus on the stories of those in the community. I think as we are helping build or helping people understand that it's a possible safety issue, they need to see the faces of those who are directly affected by by the things that are happening around San Sebastian. And so we're very careful about making sure that the voice of the Order of Augustinian recollects. And in this photo, you have Father Junicio Selma, who is, of course, the head of the order, the prior provincial, talk about why it's important to support San Sebastian. We need them to talk about it themselves rather than us speaking for them, because it's a very dangerous game if you misrepresent anyone. And I think that's something that we try to keep in mind just across the board. Also, if you notice the two rightmost, I hope this is not mirrored, the two rightmost squares, we've also made videos talking to people from the community. So Mang Viado, si Mang V, he is the security guard extraordinaire of San Sebastian. I'm not sure if he even really took a long break during COVID. He's still there. He talks about how saving San Sebastian means also saving the home that he's made for more than, I believe, 29 years. So trying to make it more concrete to people about why your signature matters to others. Oh my God, am I getting emotional? Okay, anyway, so those are two examples. And then another thing that we're trying to do with this is to empower our existing community. So this model that we had was created, I believe, November last year, and then we launched in January. So we wanted to be able to activate and maintain our existing partnerships to really cascade the 400,000 signatures, because really 400,000 signatures is a huge amount. And we chose it because it represents the 400 years. But, thinking about it afterwards and trying to be realistic with it, we really had to figure out, okay, we need to tap the OAR schools. We need to tap the parish, Quiapo groups, other heritage groups who would be willing to help. And so we found that working with them and allowing them to echo our call for help without giving them a script was really useful, because it made it so that their call for help came from somewhere else, but still relevant to San Sebastian. And then, of course, we want to grow the community together and build new partnerships and create larger networks. So if you go on our page, it's almost in every post we do plug the petition link, because you just never know who might listen and want to help. And so we ask people to share it, and we hope that you can as well after signing up yourself. And I think we just added this little section because originally when we were planning this, we didn't know who else might join us, and so we were very surprised, and happily so, that the Manila Cathedral came in, an office from CBCP came in, Quiapo Church came in, and they all lent their voice and are standing with San Sebastian because they believe in the work. And it really speaks about, again, that it's those who use San Sebastian and see the value of it, especially as a church, that will help save the basilica itself. And then, of course, we have to keep the issue relevant because we need to keep the numbers rolling. I think this one on the left is from April. Yeah, this was for the April report. So we do a monthly report on the highlights, how many people have signed up. And so this was like 2,000 signatures ago. Because I think a lot of the students that we've been speaking to were inspired to also help, especially from the OAR schools. And so we need to keep the conversation going. And we also are pushed to find ways to reach people. If you're already talking to Facebook, and we already know who we're talking to in Facebook. It's 25 to 34 years old males based in Manila. We have that info, and we're already talking to people on Instagram. And so you have to figure out new ways to get people involved. And so we decided that, why don't we also plug in Save San Sebastian in terms of the campaign, into merchandise? Because I think it makes a lot of sense that if you're doing a campaign, you have people who will want to sign up, but then there will also be people who will want to do more and have something like a physical thing to remember how they supported San Sebastian. And so we recently launched two collections. The middle one was launched May 5. So the Baste at 400, to celebrate the 400 years, we launched it on May 5, which is the anniversary of the very first San Sebastian, which is why 400. And it's really geared towards those who are religious, of course. And so at the same time, yesterday evening, we launched Heritage Prints by Gio Absid. Oh gosh, I hope I said his name right. By Gio, we just call him Gio. Heritage Prints because, well, it's not just because his prints have San Sebastian, but also because the message of his work is about imparting the stories of these spaces that happen to involve or happen to include San Sebastian. And so from our merchandise, 10% of all proceeds go to the restoration of San Sebastian, which is, of course, under the Save San Sebastian campaign. So we're trying to be more creative. And, even though the campaign will end technically on on August, so we're just a few months away, the restoration will still continue. It's not going to stop. And so we want to already establish things that we can see through after August. Okay, and then that's my last slide. So we always try to be positive and be optimistic that together with everyone helping us, we will save San Sebastian. This QR link over here on the right, if I'm mirrored, please let me know. There's only one QR link, so I hope it's okay. The QR link, if you would like to scan it, it goes directly to the change.org. But I know that Angel and the others in the team have been plugging the link as well. They've made their own link, which is great. Thank you so much. You can click that. But also, I invite you guys to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and then if you want to check out our materials and give a little something back for the restoration, it's sansebastianconservation.org. And I think I'm in time. I'm on schedule. We're good. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Facardo, for your insights about the San Sebastian Basilica Foundation. It really is a feat to be able to digitally engage your audience after such a sudden change. The last few parts of our program will be a digital tour facilitated by Ms. Isabel de Dios and a short discussion after the tour moderated by Sir Elaine Dedrick Camiling.
Isabel de Dios is the education head of San Sebastian Basilica Conservation and Development Foundation. She manages the education programs, including the in-house Basilica tours and Bukas Quiapo tours. She was the project lead for the foundation's latest collaboration with Ecomos Philippines and SciArc, a California-based nonprofit organization that specializes in digitally recording some of the world's most significant cultural sites. Under the foundation's We Learn as One campaign to bring the basilica into people's homes, a new immersive tour was developed so everyone can experience the San Sebastian even in a global pandemic. She graduated in 2017 from the University of the Philippines Diliman with a bachelor's degree in public administration. It is with great honor that we welcome Ms. Isabel de Dios to facilitate an immersive digital tour of the San Sebastian Basilica.
Hi, okay, hi, thank you. Uh, Thank you, Benilde Arts Management, for having us here, and thank you to our previous speakers. I have my notebook here. I was on participant student mode all throughout this afternoon, so I have to switch to speaker mode now. So, hi, I'm Isabel. I'm the education officer for San Sebastian. I'll just let me see if I can share my screen. Okay, here. So, as Mocha said, I'll be facilitating a virtual tour of San Sebastian. I screen recorded it for everyone just so we don't run into technical difficulties. But before then, I'll just provide like a brief intro of our tours in general, or like the work that went into the virtual experience of San Sebastian. So okay, let me look at the time also. I have 15 minutes. I promised 15 minutes, no more. Okay, and the reason why I have to remind myself that is because our tours are usually an hour and a half long, but I can go up to like, I don't know, 5 hours just talking about San Sebastian, and I have done it. So I have to mind myself really well. Okay, so my brief intro is about bringing San Sebastian Basilica to you, and this is jumping off of what Sam was presenting earlier about bringing San Sebastian online, because the tours, as if you've been on any tour, you would know that you need to be there essentially. Like, you need to be there, you need to be physically present to kind of have the whole experience of a place. And that's one of the reasons why traveling is important. It's the reason why visiting is important, because a physical immersive experience is really different. And really, the pandemic is just, whew, huh, that was, it really gave us something more creative to think about. So I'll explain it as we go. Um, okay, so one of the things that we had to keep in mind as we transition from physical tours to something more online is that, what do we deliver in our tours? It's just kind of like going back to basics. What do we want to bring online now, um, as alternatives to our tours, now that we can actually physically tour San Sebastian Basilica? So one is the knowledge, two is of course the experience. So the knowledge part, Sam was explaining this earlier, but I just want to recall Sir Benson. Okay, Sir Benson's question as he started this presentation. He was asking, when you were looking at these landmarks, when was the first time you learned about them in school? And San Sebastian Basilica is one of them, in one of the examples that he gave kanina. And I was thinking, when did I learn about San Sebastian Basilica? When I was a student. I learned about San Sebastian Basilica after I was a student. It was actually through Sam's tour, and that was when I was like, it's all metal, it's neo gothic, it's so tall, it's so grand, it's so big, and it's that sense of, it's that magic that we actually deliver in our tours, along with the knowledge, along with the experience. And that's one of the things we've been trying to replicate through our online content, culminating in a virtual experience I'll show you later. Okay, I have 8 minutes left to speak. Okay. So for the knowledge, what do we say in our tours? We talk about the history. And the history, marami pang bullet points yan. If you look at our mother document for our tours, it's actually like history religious, history architecture, history social, history cultural. And what we're very fortunate with in the foundation is that, like, as Sam mentioned earlier, the documentation of San Sebastian is really quite complete. The gaps perhaps are in the personal narratives of people who have been to San Sebastian since it first opened 1621. But in terms of who designed whom, who designed what, not who designed who, AI, who designed what, and who donated what, all of that is in this document called the Cosas Notables, available in the Archivos Recoletos de Filipinas under Father Kiletan. And we were very lucky that he opened his doors and actually gave us a peek of like what this story is throughout 400 years. And it is a beautiful story, and that's why it takes me 5 hours sometimes to do tours. Sometimes lang, very special ano yun, very special, mga mabusising tour yun. Another thing that we talk about is of course the architecture. It's neo-Gothic, it's all metal. It has 132 columns. Sorry, my sister is also in the room, work from home mode. And another thing we talk about is the restoration. Now, the restoration is actually one of the reasons why, in my entire experience as tour guide, because as education head, I'm also overseeing the tours, as Mocha mentioned earlier, I've toured about upwards of 1,000 people, 2,000 people over the last 3 years. And I can safely say that no two tours are the same. And part of the reason is why, can you hear her? I'm sorry. Part of the reason is that the restoration has updates nearly every week. And sometimes I actually have to correct myself during a tour na actually last week I said na ganito lang yung gagawin namin. Pero this week, apparently, ganito na pala. So it's also that kind of personalized, interactive, very quick to update narrative. That's also part of the tours. Okay, so the knowledge part is done. Now the experience part. Now this is something that we can't quantify. And there is no science to it really. There's no formula to it. I've toured people as young as 7, and we had to hold that child really tightly as we went up the bell towers because it was a whew, and we had to have a waiver signed because very small children, and someone as old as 93, as in Baston and all. She was a grandma. She was a Lola. She came with a pilgrimage tour, and she climbed 6 stories, 6 stories of winding staircases. And as you go up the basilica before you get to the towers, it's really quite dark already. It's all only natural light. It was, I think, approaching late afternoon. And this is essentially the range of audiences, range of people that we all have to engage with, and not just basically info dump on them. We have to connect with them. And in our tours, this is what we found out. Na in the experience, it involves one, a sense of adventure, as you see in the top left. Also, I hope also that I'm not married. Top left, the adventure part. Those are 2 students. They made it to the bell towers. It's a long climb. It's a long, sweaty, hot climb up the bell towers. So they're just enjoying the fresh air. They're looking out towards Chinatown. You can see there parang the big iconic violet building in the heart of Binondo. So they're taking pictures up there. They're enjoying the fresh air. And it's always, whenever we go upstairs, I like to be physically present to see the relief on people's faces. We're like, ah, ah. For the 93-year-old, she was like, I made it. And it's always that kind of it's always that sense of celebration, sense of victory, sense of like giddy happiness when they reach the top, and it's where we end our tour. And that's how we kind of want to always end our tours, on a high note, but literally and figuratively. The next part of the experience would be the sense of wonder. Okay, on the top right photo, this is a group of they're pilgrims, group of pilgrims. They're from Poland. As you can see from the date, it's 2020. This is one of the last tours I've done in a while. This was in January 2020, before the worst of the pandemic hit. No quarantine yet. Okay, disclaimer: no quarantine yet. And what they're seeing, you're seeing their faces. They're transfixed at what I'm doing. This is me in the leftmost part of the screen of the picture. And what I'm doing is that I am proving to them that San Sebastian Basilica is an all-metal building. And how do I prove that? I stick magnets. Sometimes I like to ask questions na, so talaga bang all metal ang San Sebastian? Do you think this part is metal? Do you think that part is metal? Then I have magnets. I just stick it on and they're like, ay, di naman bakal yan eh. Then I stick it on and they're like, oh, bakal. And that's another magic moment. It's kind of like a highlight that would not just make San Sebastian Basilica a heritage site na important, but also San Sebastian Basilica, I experienced it. It's kind of translating what is intangible to something lived, something experienced, something more concrete. Another one is texture, part of our tours. But these are this is a group of kids. I love them. They're from Center Montessori School. They came here for a tour in 2017, and they are pushing open the doors. Kasi that's another part of the tour where you get to push open all metal doors, and they're just fighting over who gets to do it best. Another one is interaction. It's between me and the crowd, and most importantly, it's between the person visiting and the place. It's that kind of intimate connection with the place. So with all of this is what we've done so far. So Sam mentioned it earlier, because all across the board, we have been trying to be more educational. We have been trying to go by very consistent narrative themes. And what Sam mentioned earlier, they were also carrying elements of what the tour used to be before the pandemic. Our very last, okay, we have time to play it. We don't have time to play it. I won't play it anymore. But this is the restoration station. This one was be a clip of architect Karen Paredes Santelian, one of the architects who work on our conservation management plan. She's in conversation with our executive directors, Claire Bitog. And it's, yeah, like Sam mentioned earlier, it's a way of humanizing the restoration. It's a way of introducing who the experts are and what the field is doing behind the scenes. So this is the knowledge part. This is the part where we just get our research, the wealth of information from the archives, and translate it into graphics. But now, how do you get the experience part? Now, this is the SciArc part. SciArc, as mentioned by Sam earlier, I believe it was Mocha. SciArc is a company that provides a service for documentation of heritage sites, of built heritage sites. And I believe architect Vasquez actually touched on this quite a lot. It's architectural documentation. And apparently, okay, I'm not an architect, so I don't have the authority to speak in superlatives, but apparently this is one of the best technologies out there. It's photogrammetry. It's photogrammetry. It's photorealistic documentation of built heritage. And this, the experience that I'm about to show you, it's actually a second grant from SciArc. The first grant was actually a collaboration between ICOMOS, International Council of Monuments and Sites, Philippines, and SciArc, funded by Iron Mountain. And what they gave us was like just a photo, it's like a very photorealistic snapshot of everything about the basilica. And all of that is visual documentation that will feed into the restoration team, where they use it for as reference. Because when this dropped with us, when the technology was given to us or the materials were given to us, we did not have scaffolding yet. Yung picture na pinakita ni Sam na scaffolding sa may sa loob ng simbahan, wala pa nun. But then we still need to document the topmost parts of the church. We need to document the dome. How do we get to the dome? Do we fly up to the dome? Do we get a drone up there? What do we do? What do we do that's safe? What do we do that's easy? What do we do that's efficient? And this technology actually gave us that efficiency, that safety, and most of all, that comprehensive view or very detailed view of San Sebastian. So, okay. Our part naman, because we're not architects, what we did with this was that we looked at it and we're like, oh my gosh, mukha siyang pang Skyrim. I don't know if you've played the game. It's like virtual reality, open world. I want to explore everything. I want to sit on the pews. I want to open the confession boxes. I want to do everything in this world because it's so photorealistic and so beautiful. And SciArc fortunately reached out to us and asked, do you want a guided tour to go with this? And immediately, yes, we do want a guided tour with this. So what I'm about to show you is just a short version of the tour. It does look, thank you, Charles. He plays Skyrim. Okay, what I'm about to show you is just about half of it. You can browse it on your own time. SciArc has a portfolio of so many sites around the world, like Babylon, Petra, and Jordan, that you can explore through your computer. So, okay, I'll play a video super quick. I screen recorded myself, so I'm going around the screen, switching the view. So, apologies if my mouse is jiggly. Okay. I'll mute myself. Hold on.
In the year 1620,
Isabel, I think you're on mute.
I just muted myself. Oh my gosh. Okay, moment of panic. I thought I muted myself for the entire segment. Oh gosh. Okay, wait, hold on. Let me just reshare it. Just to make sure that I'm sharing the sound. Okay, and I'm sharing the sound because our guide for the guided tour is Father Antonio Aslam Chaibo OAR, who was very gracious to give us his time and his voice for the tour. Okay, oh no, I'm on overtime. I'm so sorry. Okay, here.
1. San Sebastian Basilica was founded here in Quiapo in Manila, the capital of the Philippines. Before it was known as Quiapo, this was the marshland of a barrio or a small village called Kalumpang. This was how my recollect predecessors received the land, donated by a devotee named Don Bernardino del Castillo, who was also the military commander of Fort Santiago which was the center of Spanish authority in the Philippines. Don Bernardino's only request was to dedicate the church to San Sebastian, the patron saint of soldiers and athletes. The neighborhood has seen many changes since then. By the 19th century, the marshlands of Kalumpang developed into the scenic suburb of Quiapo. The residents of this neighborhood were among the first parishioners of San Sebastian. Just before World War II, the Quiapo district became known as a haven for the arts. Renowned painters, sculptors, and jewelry makers all lived within earshot of the bells of San Sebastian. This deep love for the arts is reflected inside the church, where you will see the works of some of these artists. The resilience of San Sebastian is prayer in action and the marriage of faith and science. Inspired to build a stronger home for Our Lady of Mount Carmel for the community, the Recollect Friars commissioned the design of an all-metal church. The industrialist spirit of 1891 gave them cast iron and mild steel, moving forward from the old materials of stone and wood. Fires, wars, earthquakes, and pandemics have come and gone, but San Sebastian remains an icon of permanence in our city. It remains a dedicated home to Our Lady that still inspires the hearts of many devotees. This uniqueness was so celebrated that in 1890, the year before the basilica even opened, it became the first church in the country to be declared a minor basilica by the Vatican. Today, it holds two of the highest titles of heritage sites given by the Philippine government: National Cultural Treasure and National Historical Landmark. Our Lady of Mount Carmel de San Sebastian is the first Carmelite image to arrive on Philippine shores in 1618. She was gifted by the Order of the Descalced Carmelites in Mexico to ensure the safe passage through the Pacific of some early Recollect missionaries. She has watched over the community since her enshrinement in the first San Sebastian Church 3 years after her arrival. It was Our Lady's presence that first inspired the Recollects to build a strong home for her and the community. Today, we see that she continues to inspire the hearts of the friars and many more Filipinos around the world. Every January 9, at the Feast of the Black Nazarene, we observe the Dungaw, which is the tradition of bringing the image of Our Lady to the walls of San Sebastian so she can meet the image of the Black Nazarene. This is an important part of the larger celebration of the Translacion, or the procession of the Black Nazarene around the city of Manila. Thousands of people fill the plaza outside the church in a brief but solemn ceremony of song and prayer. Many of the trompe-l'oeil paintings decorate the interior of the dome, which is the crowning glory of the basilica. This is one of the most photographed areas of the church, loved by tourists and parishioners alike. Invisible to most eyes are the dangers faced today by the all-metal dome, which needs our most urgent action. Leaks throughout the church develop over time, and now rust threatens to permanently damage the stability of the dome and its replaceable paintings. More than this, it is now also a threat to the community of people that serves it. The Augustinian Recollect Order, the San Sebastian Parish, and the San Sebastian Basilica Conservation and Development Foundation are now working together to protect not just the dome, but the entire basilica. We collaborate with experts like SciArc and ICOMOS Philippines to document and share the story of our basilica with the world. Today, we are inviting you in your corner of the world to help save our church so future generations can continue to experience San Sebastian Basilica. We are not just saving the legacy of our order, but also an important landmark of resilience in our city of Manila. Learn how you can be a part of history today. Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/SaveSSBasilica or email us at savesansebastian.org@gmail.com for more information. Maraming salamat. Thank you very much for visiting us today, and I hope to welcome you in person soon.
Okay, I'm not on mute. Okay. So that was Father Tony Lim Quiapo. That's just half the tour. You can actually, on the actual site, you can visit sciarc.org, and there's a 3D Explorer where you can zoom in very, very close and kind of just get the feel of walking through San Sebastian. So thank you. That's it. Sorry, I said only 15 minutes, but thank you. Just please take note of the website so you can take the tour on your own time. Namas complete. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Isabel. I have actually never been to the San Sebastian Basilica, but I really hope to be able to experience the magic of the San Sebastian Basilica someday. Next in our program, I would like to introduce our moderator for a short discussion. Feel free to send in your questions in the chat box. We have a few already there, and we will accommodate as many questions as the time allows. Moderating the discussion will be Elaine Dedrick Camiling, current chairperson of the Arts Management Program and the organization advisor of Benilde Arts Management. He pioneered the Bank of the Philippine Islands Arts Education Program through BPI Foundation in 2018, working on its art collection, museum, and programs. In 2020, he co-led the artistic direction of X Platform's coloring zine for kids entitled Pigments, Coloring with Philippine Culture and Heritage. Without further ado, let me welcome Elaine Dedrick Camiling.
Thank you, Angel, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you also to our speakers today, Architect Harvey, Sir Branson, Samantha, and Isabel. No, we've been working with them, I think, for months to make this event possible. Anyway, we apologize that we're going over time a bit, but we'll try to make this short as possible. All right. So upon registration, we've been asking participants or audiences to send in questions which they think that the speakers could answer. The first question is actually, I think, for San Sebastian Foundation. Maybe Isabel or Samantha can answer this. I'm quoting from Rachel Angelova. What specific measures were undertaken to preserve the San Sebastian Church? And are you planning to campaign for the Basilica's inclusion in UNESCO World Heritage List as well? It may be a good step to consider in terms of saving, preserving, and promoting the Basilica itself.
Okay, I think I can take that one. So
Alright,
thank
go
you
on.
for whoever asked the question. I'll actually just be answering a portion of it, but if it's possible, our executive director is actually here, so she may have a little bit more info to share, if that's okay. But just to answer my bit, I can say that ever since we've done the Save San Sebastian campaign, they do ask about the UNESCO World Heritage Site quite often, and if we're going to be nominated. And I think that's something that the foundation and the order is definitely looking towards. But that requires a very large dossier for the application. And I think, Claire, if you would like to step in for the answer, perhaps you could.
Hi, Sam. Hi, everyone. Could you see me? I'm sorry. Okay, let me
Here.
just take care of this. So I think the first question has something to do with what have we been doing so far in terms of actually saving the Basilica. Well, I think both Sam and Isabel already mentioned that while we're running this petition to have 400,000 signatures that eventually would really go to lawmakers, hopefully, or critical decision makers to help us in crafting guidelines or safeguards to protect the Basilica, we are still continuing with our actual restoration work, which involves diagnostics, assessments, and at the same time crafting interventions for the critical areas in the basilica. Now, that thing about World Heritage, definitely it's something that we're considering. At some point in the basilica's history, we were actually part of the tentative list, meaning to say we were kind of shortlisted, but there were things that happened in between. Hence, we were removed from that list. But right now, since a lot of international experts have also been calling us and actually saying that, you know what, this is not just Filipino heritage, but this is a heritage that should be shared to everyone. Hence, we're looking into the possibility of actually having this nominated. Maybe not for this year, but we're hoping that in the next 5 years or so, it will be actually part of the list that will be considered for World Heritage Sites. So a huge part of that, a huge part of the dossier would actually be the community support. So not only are we supporting um, the basilica in opposition of the condominium building, and not only are we petitioning for lawmakers to create safeguards, but we're actually doing this to tell the entire world that there is an entire community of supporters that actually support San Sebastian. And that would matter a lot. Thank you.
Right. Thank you for clarifying that, clear, and sharing initiatives or plans. No? And I'm sure the foundation would need help or support from the communities in the country or even outside when the time happens. All right. The next, thank you also, Samantha. The next question is, I believe, for Sir Harvey. What can you say on the battle of historical cities and utopian cities? Is there a possible vision of a Platonic city in the Philippines? And how do you feel about the future of heritage architecture, Sir Harvey?
Um, I just wanna start with the first one. Because I didn't catch the first one, so I'm gonna do the second one muna. The future of heritage conservation or architecture in the Philippines is actually great, and I feel like the community has been growing, specifically in our school, wherein there's a lot of interest within our community. So that gives me a lot of hope. And at the same time, the availability of data, information, and also different advocacies that our students or the youth can get into is really surprising, and it was not like this when I was studying. So it gives us great hope that this can snowball into a bigger movement, and that sort of appreciation and understanding of the value of our cultural heritage is now being shown by the participation of our students in this talk. So that's a great sign for it. So the first one, sorry, I did not catch the first question.
Right. Let me reiterate. What can you say about the battle of historical cities and utopian cities? Would there be a possible vision of a Platonic city in the Philippines? A combination of historical and utopian cities?
Okay, so maybe he's talking about in terms of visions. Utopian meaning, I think, in my estimation, our capitalist view of what Manila should be in terms of being full of high-rise buildings, and then how it could be complemented with our historical fabric, which is in Intramuros, in Mendiola, in Recto, in Escolta. Actually, in my point of view, they all have a distinct position in our built environment. And it's not about choosing one over the other. It's about creating that happy medium wherein both of them could exist. And I know this has been a problem for heritage sites like San Sebastian, wherein they are protecting even their context, because this can also affect the 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 UNESCO certification. So that is a sort of a balancing act. But for me, as a practicing architect that also have views in speculative nature of the practice, heritage is an important medium to ground that practice in terms of knowing where you're from, knowing where you've been, makes your point of view more modern. And I think that is a misconception wherein when you talk to architects that are mainly dealing with heritage buildings, is that, oh, these are old-fashioned architects, but actually it's opposite to that. Architects that are steep in this practice are actually more modern in their practice, because we understand the context of the site, we understand the nature of the fabric of history of the site, and we try to create architecture with architecture that respects and collaborates with that existing context. So I think that's also an important aspect in this, and it doesn't make you steep in the past by practicing heritage conservation. It actually gives you a leg up in terms of creating visionary projects by having your feet firmly on the ground and having a very good facility when it comes to your history.
Right, right. Thank you, Sir Harvey. The next question is for Sir Brenton. Um, what are your thoughts about integrating basic science to concepts in the teaching of heritage appreciation? I'm gonna quote from John Michael. Malaking tulong po ito sa pag-analyze ng tangible materials sa conservation aspect. Yes, Brenton?
Okay. So thank you for that question. Actually, at present, wala naman talagang standalone na heritage appreciation subject sa basic education curriculum. So kahit yung arts, 'di ba, hindi naman siya focused lang sa heritage appreciation. Yung social studies, mas ang focus niya ay history, geography, civics. So sa aking palagay, so in my own opinion, mahalaga na itong heritage appreciation as much as possible, kung kayang ipasok sa ibang subjects, kung kayang ipasok sa existing curriculum, mas maganda. So maganda yung sinasabi ni Sir John Michael, especially na sa science, 'di ba? Hindi lang ako familiar sa K-12 science curriculum ngayon kung paano nila ini-integrate yung iba't ibang mga bagay, pero magandang starting point siya. So sa math, halimbawa yung mga problems, sa physics, 'di ba, yung mga forces. So feeling ko kaya siyang ipasok. So nakadepende rin kay teacher kung paano niya ito ipapasok sa curriculum. Pero the idea of integration is great.
Right, right. And I think, Sir Brenton, it also requires collaboration, let's say, among institutions and groups. Because, for example, there are some university museums which actually practice interdisciplinary programming. For example, nakikipagtrabaho sila with chemistry teachers in terms of talking about art conservation in relation to their collection, and also let's say history teachers in terms of how do you present the objects in terms of an art historical lens, for example. Right.
Sir Lane, can I just add
Yes,
ni
go
Sir
on.
Brenton?
Yes,
I totally agree, and I think not just placing heritage in a pedestal will not help. Involving it and putting it as a sort of a laboratory that can collaborate with different facets of our education system is actually key, so that they can really understand and appreciate how it is really entwined in our everyday life. Yun yung medyo mas maganda kaysa siya na parang in a breakable class that you can touch. I think heritage should be treated as a sort of something that's more malleable and something that you can really put your hands in. There's more interaction, and in that sense, more appreciation then.
Right, right, right. Thank you, Sir Harvey, Sir Benson. Um, the next question is actually from myself, no, and everyone can answer. I'm curious. Of course, you work with a lot of people, a lot of organizations, both local and international. Are there any ethical concerns that, or maybe dilemma that you encounter, let's say, in your practice? For example, partnerships with the foundation, in terms of conservation practices with Sir Harvey, and maybe with Sir Branson in terms of the coming up with curricula, coming up with lessons. Are there any experiences like that which we could learn from? And how did you actually resolve it?
Okay, I just had to get a go ahead from Sam.
Go,
Okay.
Isabel.
Um, okay. Okay. So for the tours, kunyari, or for the messaging, or for the narratives that we deal with in San Sebastian Basilica, we are very aware of this tendency to romanticize a golden era of the past. Kasi when you look at Quiapo then, Quiapo now, Quiapo then different, Quiapo now different. And what we're seeing is that a lot of nostalgia actually wants a return to that glorious, okay, bourgeois, Burgess Quiapo, and kind of discounting what the Quiapo is now. And in terms of the messaging, and we've been very consistent with this among all of our partner organizations, is that we don't want to discount what is Quiapo now. Because Quiapo now is Quiapo, period. It's not bad Quiapo, it's not good Quiapo, it's Quiapo, period. And San Sebastian lives in this context also, as much as it lives in the context of that golden era or that past or Quiapo of 1891. So how we dealt with that is we've been very transparent, really. Na yes, Quiapo was home to mansions. Yes, Quiapo used to be like, I don't know, Ayala, the Forbes Park of its day, may mga ganon. Pero we also say na Quiapo evolved, Quiapo changed with the time. Quiapo, parang sabi ni Architect Bas kanina, morphology, I suppose the evolution of Quiapo is like this, it changed like this. But San Sebastian's use remains the same. So actually, the changing of Quiapo did not change the use of San Sebastian, and that's actually a high point for our narrative. Kasi for 400 years, the significance of this church has been the same. And that's actually a case for restoration, a case for preservation. So yun yung isa sa mga, parang when it comes out in tours, I'm like, let me do this diplomatically. Let me do this well. Parang ganun. So yes, that's one example. So maybe Sam can add something if she has.
Yeah, I think I agree with Isabel's what she pointed out, especially when we were refining the narrative for Bukas Quiapo tours, because you do take them through Quiapo and they see the reality of Quiapo, and they also see it and you're introducing them to the history of Quiapo as it was before with the ilustrados and all of those things. And at some point in the tour, there's always going to be that one person who's going to be like, "Ay, sana malinis pa rin ng Quiapo, sana mayaman pa rin ng Quiapo." And that's why it's built also into the narrative to tell people that what's important is that Quiapo is still a home that accepts people, and that's what we try to introduce through Bukas Quiapo tours. We tell them that the story of Quiapo is not about the story of the people who lived in these mansions. It's the story about how this place, built around churches, built around a mosque, is a place that welcomes everyone. It's a story about inclusion, and I think that resonates with people because you tell them, even if you yourself are not from Quiapo, you can have a place in Quiapo. If you care about Quiapo, there is a part of you that these places matter to you. And so we try to move or change their idea of what the place is, and be like, would you rather that these places are empty, versus people going to the churches, going to the mosque, you being here experiencing what it is now. So it's a little bit of adjusting the narrative, but I think a lot of people, we tell them that please keep your mind open to what Quiapo is, because yeah, it's Quiapo. It is what it is now. We can't do anything about it.
Right. Thank you, Isabel. Samantha. Yes, Sir Branson or Sir Harvey, would you like to add anything? All right, all right, all right. Thank you very much. We can take one more question from the audience from Facebook Live from Camila Ginoba. Bilang isang youth po ba, ano ang pwede kong magawa para mas ma-appreciate pa ng kapwa ko yung heritage natin? All right, I think that's for anyone. While the speakers are actually thinking of their answers,
I can start, Ali.
All right, Sir Harvey, go on.
Siguro they can start by participating in programs and being specific with their locality, community nila. What we've been seeing is because of globalization and in terms of yung saturation of Western culture into our everyday language, local histories became more interesting and became more important. So I think for the youth to really participate, it's a start siguro to know where you are. If you are from Paco, if you are from Quezon Province, know the history at least. Know the the um, the important food in your city. This kind of little steps. And if you are familiar with content, you can create different contents based on those material culture that you can research on. So I think it's best that you start from where you're from and try to, in your own little way, try to promote your particular area and try to collate whatever history, material culture that are available in your area and try to champion where you're from. And I think that's one of the best ways to really participate in this kind of movement. Of course, San Sebastian is a big movement and it's already established movement. So they are already international. But you can also do that and you can also start small in your own little communities. And I think that is heritage is everything when it comes to communities. It could be yung tindahan sa kanto ninyo, and heritage is what you define it. So what makes it important for you, that is heritage for you. So it's case to case basis. So I would urge them to start with where they are from, what they are, what are the things that are available to them, things that they can have access to. And so start with that kind of research. You don't start with big things again. Start with small and accessible things, and I think it would come a long way.
Right. Thank you, Sir Harvey. I think that's a very good advice. Yes, Sir Branson.
Magpapaalam din ako that I'll have to excuse myself after this. After answering this because may work ako ng 6:15 dito sa Japan. So, basically when I discuss citizenship sa mga bata, so merong 3 levels akong pinapresent na when you participate in a community project, so usually you can be a personally responsible citizen. So siguro sa field ng heritage appreciation, ito yung kapag pumunta ka sa isang lugar, hindi ka magkakalat, so i-maintain mo yung respect doon sa lugar na yon. And then yung second level ay participatory, so you can form organizations, you can join organizations na nagpo-protect nitong mga sites na ito. And yung last level, yung ultimate level, justice-oriented. So hanapin mo halimbawa dun sa mga ano ba yung reason bakit kailangan magtayo ng condominium sa may sa may San Sebastian Basilica, and then discover parang gumawa ng petition sa local government against this. So maraming levels actually ng participation. Yung kagaya nga nung sabi ni Sir Harvey, you can start from yourself and then go along, participate in organizations at ayun. So depende sa'yo kung paano mo gagamitin yung voice mo as a youth. So yun, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sir Branson, and we apologize for going overtime. All right, Sam and Isabel, would you like to add anything else?
Okay, so I believe your question was how can youth help promote heritage, what they can do in their own way. There's a lot. I think for us, because how we approach it is that, there's a place for everyone on the table. And so I think it's a matter of trying to also find, because heritage is so broad. I think that's one thing that we learned from this discussion. And so, if this person is particularly interested in doing heritage work in the future, I highly suggest that you start emailing people and start asking them about volunteer programs. Do they need interns? Because you learn a lot learning with other people rather than learning alone. I mean, that's definitely, your desire to want to work in heritage or, promote heritage starts from yourself. But then you also have to go out and learn from experts, or maybe not all experts, but to learn from people, their experiences and how that works. But also, I think it has to work both ways. Also from the institution side, it would be great if more institutions could be more open or more accepting of volunteers, because that's really how people personally, that's how I got my foot in the door, doing a lot of volunteer work and internships. And that kind of also helps you get a better idea of where exactly in the field you would like to work in. Like, do you want to be an architect, or do you want to do something that's something else related in the field? It really depends on the person, but people need to, I think the part there is also from the side of the institution, and something that we're also still working on is how to give those opportunities to people who are still studying, and they just want to know more about what they can do to help. And actually, it's really good that, especially if that person is a student, you still have a lot of time. Try and experiment with things that you can do. And like architect Harvey said, if you can make your own content, there will be people who will respond to that content. And you never really know where that's going to take you. Like for us, finding designers, for example, for our merch, on our end, a lot of it is literally going through Instagram, getting recommendations, asking students, could you send me your portfolio? What have you done? Can you send me your Instagram? Because, you might not necessarily have the experience yet. Again, but this depends on a lot of factors, like what are you applying to? But you might not have the experience yet. But if you're willing to learn and there's a way for you to apply what you already know, that can go a long way. Like Isabel is public admin. I don't know which side she's in. She graduated public admin. We hired her to be a tour guide as a public admin, like we hired you right out of graduation, because I was like, do you like to do research? Is this something that you like to do? Are you okay with talking with other people? Because there's a lot you need to talk to, a lot of people, and you just have to be comfortable with it. So being open to learning, I guess, is another important thing.
Right. Thank you, Samantha. Isabel, would you like to add to that?
Okay. What Sam said, yes, that's true. I'm public ad. I am not an architect. I am not even a teacher. But I'm an extrovert. Who likes to make chica. But no. Okay. Actual suggestion is like how I got into how my enthusiasm for heritage kind of came about. It's finding the gaps in what exists. So that's kind of very nebulous out there. Pero take, for example, something that is mainstream or something that is publicly available and what we know about history or how we imagine history. That's films, pop culture, games. That's, I don't know, do you play Age of Empire? That's so old school. You play Mobile Legends. If you play I play Mobile Legends. If you play Mobile Legends, you know that there are heroes there. So what are the gaps there? So it's kind of like knowing what is needed and kind of trying to fill it. Because when I got into this, and actually what really inflamed my love for research is that I watched Genera Luna when I was a student. If you've seen the movie, you should go see it. I've seen it like 10 times. I watched Genera Luna and I was like, oh, this is the story. Oh, there has got to be more. So I read books, I did research, I went on the ground. It's just kind of starting with what you love and elevating that to something that you might be good at. So, kunyari, if you love music, do you like to do lo-fi playlists? Maybe if you like to do lo-fi playlists, maybe you can explore the music of different indigenous peoples in the Philippines. Maybe there's something there for you to play around with, or something there that you can be involved with. Because something that you love, for sure, is loved by someone else. And that's kind of like how we share heritage anyway. How heritage is a conversation. It's just passionate people coming together, being passionate together. Sorry, this is very elementary of me, but yes, find what you love, elevate it, and seriously, something comes out of heart. Something comes out of heart. Oh my gosh, I'm getting emotional. But something comes out of heart. Okay.
Thank you, Isabel, Samantha, and Sir Harvey. I think from the talks and the discussion, we can we can actually say that it would be ideal for different sectors to collaborate in terms of achieving a holistic approach to promoting heritage, no, in various localities to wider audiences. Let's say, not a wider audience. All right, to close the Q&A portion, I want you to answer in one sentence, if ever. What's your wish for Philippine culture and heritage? All right.
Why?
I think you're so.
Is this Miss Universe, sir? It's such a difficult question. Okay.
In one sentence, what's your wish for Philippine culture and heritage? Too bad Sir Brenson is, just left, no? But, right, to close the Q&A, any wish for Philippine culture and heritage? Yes, go on, Isabel.
Someone's like, oh, really? Okay. My wish for Philippine cultural heritage is 1, inclusivity, 2, diversity, and 3, advocacy turned into policy. Press publica. So, as much as we want, as much as we want to create, one sentence nga naman. Anyway, inclusivity, diversity, and advocacy turned into policy. That's my wish for Philippine cultural heritage.
All right. Samantha?
She took part of my answer, so that's not fair. But for me personally, my wish for Philippine heritage, and I guess I'm speaking more about on the side of the institutions, would really be inclusivity. In terms of, wait, this is one sentence, inclusivity in terms of the voices, in terms of the stories, and in terms of the forms. By parenthesis, forms in terms of how it is translated wherever is the material.
All right.
Running sentence.
Samantha is a run. All right, Sir Harvey?
For me, sustained interest. So I'm hoping that this will be sustained, and this is a train that we all can get in. So tama yung inclusivity. So everyone can contribute. So I'm hoping for a sustained interest in terms of our heritage culture.
Right. All right. I think that ends the question and answer portion. Thank you, Samantha, Isabel, and Sir Harvey. I give the floor back to Angel and Mocha for some reminders.
Thank you, Sir Aline. Thank you, speakers. We are hoping that most questions were answered. That discussion was very insightful. Let me welcome Project Head and Beam Vice President for External Affairs for a few closing remarks.
Hi everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, Shane.
Okay, thank you very much, Mocha, and thank you very much to our speakers. So before we close this event, a very short closing remarks lang, and I want to end this event with my favorite quote from my favorite book. The most beautiful things in the world cannot be seen or touched. They are felt with the heart. That's from The Little Prince. I am very much thankful for this webinar because it made me feel the importance of our culture and it sparked the fire in my heart. It made me realize that culture is all about people and the history that we have built in a space. Culture appreciation is multidimensional and it affects everyone, and sometimes we don't realize it. And this webinar is a great way for us to be reminded of what's happening around us. And as a project head of this event together with Angel, honestly, I feel so fulfilled that we have started this conversation about culture appreciation and heritage conservation, and I hope that will this will just be the start of this very beautiful um, topic, and everyone will be tapped on to what's happening around our society and just be aware of culture appreciation and heritage. And also, I am very thankful for our speakers, very much thankful for our ambassadors and our partners. We can do this without you guys. So that's it for me. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Shane. So once again, our sincerest thanks to our guests for today, Sir Branson Andres, Architect Harvey Vasquez, Miss Samantha Pacardo, Miss Isabel de Dios, and of course, our moderator, Sir Elaine Zedric Camiling. I am sure that everyone really learned so much during this webinar. Once again, we thank our esteemed guests for sharing their knowledge with us during our event today.
Thank you everyone for spending your afternoon with us. I hope you learned a lot and enjoyed the discussions. We are nearing the end of Beyond the Basilica, Heritage Conservation and Appreciation.
So I want to ask everyone to turn on their cameras for a group picture. I'll give you a minute to get ready while I give some reminders. So please help us by accomplishing our evaluation form through the link on the screen. To receive a certificate of participation, you must accomplish this form by May 25. So if you want that, or if you want to really help us out, please accomplish the form. It will help us a lot. This is a different link, Lucy. Sorry. It's the one with the QR code. Sorry. Okay. Thank you. So that's the evaluation form. It should be in the chat also and in the Facebook Live in the comments. Next, you can connect with us through our social media channels on Facebook and Instagram at Benilde Arts Management. The BACC, or the Benilde Arts and Culture Cluster, has also been a really big help in making this event possible. So make sure you check them out as well at Benilde Arts on Facebook and Instagram. One of our goals for this event is to help out the San Sebastian Foundation in their campaign to preserve both their tangible and intangible heritage that are irreplaceable once gone. To aid in this, we kindly ask that you sign the petition to save San Sebastian through the link on the screen, yung kanina, and in the chat and comments. Ayan, okay. Thank you so much.